This is a big one. If you've been following this channel, you might have seen my pre to post-war series, and inside that we covered the Sino-American War. Well, part of the war between China and the United States was the Alaskan conflict, and we, as players, actually had the unique experience of being able to play through perhaps the most significant pre-war battle in Fallout lore through the Fallout 3 DLC, Operation Anchorage. But the question I want to raise to you, and attempt to answer myself, is Operation Anchorage a reliable narrator? That is, does this DLC, and more specifically the Anchorage simulation itself, accurately portray the events of the Sino-American War? And I mean, even without the full knowledge of the events of the war, can we figure out if it's a reliable source of information? Let me set the stage. The year is 2066. China has invaded Alaska, keen on taking the land's precious resources for themselves. America, in shock of the ordeal, retreat before returning to try and take the icy state back. However, it's really tough. China is putting up quite a fight. A solution is needed, a T-45 solution. The first set of military-worthy power armor is deployed. As it's an early iteration, the power armor units are only able to stem China from taking more land, forcing a stalemate. Both sides, keen on being the ones to break the stalemate, begin dumping their own resources and manpower into the conflict, anything that could possibly help them win. Nearly 10 years of fighting occur before America's prayers are answered. The mighty T-51. The new power armor solution was here. The boys in the big T-51s hope to be able to break the stalemate, and this is where the DLC begins. This is the point where Operation Anchorage starts. After nearly 10 years of fighting, the stalemate has been broken, and the military operation, not so secretly codenamed Anchorage, begins. So let me remind you of the question at hand. Is Operation Anchorage a reliable storyteller? The facts. Let's get some things out of the way first. Protector McGraw and Specialist Olin provide one-sentence lines that sometimes may be glossed over, but really affect the reality of the simulation. McGraw states that the Anchorage simulation is a hyper-realistic military simulation. Olin states that this simulation trained soldiers for Operation Anchorage. This confirms a few things. 1. The goal of the sim is to provide military training. It's not intended for fun. This explains why the DLC itself is pretty boring. Heyo, zinger alert. And 2, as the sim was meant to prepare soldiers for the operation, it means that the OA sim was made before the operation even happened, threatening to end this video 2 minutes in. While what Olin says is important, we will learn later that the sim has gone through several iterations. Maybe the version of the Operation Anchorage simulation that we play through is the most historically accurate one. After all, the version that we would play in-game would likely be the most up-to-date one too, as there's no evidence that anyone other than the Outcast had access to the sim, and also no evidence of any tinkering with it either. So who's to say that once the real-life Operation Anchorage was completed, the sim was updated to reflect the real-life one? In addition to what McGraw and Olin mention, there's another key piece of info at the outpost. The VSS Research Terminal reports. If you've played Fallout 3 or have watched people talk about Fallout 3 and specifically the Operation Anchorage DLC, you are probably already thinking this at the start of the video. The VSS Research Terminal in the Outcast Outpost already shines some light indicating that the Anchorage simulation may be more fiction than fact. It also proves that various versions of the sim exist. An entry recorded on September 6th, 2077 reads, "Sim back up and running after another few days of changes. Chase is running everyone ragged, making tweaks here and there. The sim is, without any shadow of a doubt, divorced from reality. I've never seen the classified military reports, but some of the stuff Chase has added to the sim, there's no way it happened like that. Version 736099 was scrapped after Chase decided his face didn't look just right. I realize that progress reports aren't the place for this. There are concerns that the man is losing it. No one confronts him because everyone is scared. After West dropped off the grid, there were lots of rumors about the military commandeering private contractors, and no one wants to give Chase a reason to do that here. But really, what's the point in running this sim over and over and over? Any tactical data was mined months ago. Unfortunately, this is the earliest report given. I wish we had one closer to the end of the real-life Operation Anchorage. The way that the entry is phrased makes it seem like at some point the sim was more historically accurate than it is now, and now General Chase is making tweaks to it to make it more true to his ideal version of the events, regardless of how accurately or inaccurately it portrays the conflict. The author notes that any data has already been mined, implying that the sim has run its course, whatever that may be, and future changes aren't necessary. So already we've sort of answered the titular question. General Chase was making tweaks to the sim, causing its legitimacy to be called into question, but the author of the VSS terminal reports is likely a programmer and not a soldier. Who's he to say what did and didn't happen in the last frontier? The author of the entry does note that they've never seen the classified reports. Maybe everything Chase was implementing was true. Well, it's likely not, but I believe that there's enough reasonable doubt for me to continue with this video. Let's set up a timeline. The timeline. We're not worried about past versions of the sim, the ones before the real-life OA. We know that those ones wouldn't be accurate, as the event hadn't happened yet. Makes sense, right? We're concerned with the version that the Lone Wanderer goes through during the DLC, likely the most up-to-date version. Anchorage, Alaska was liberated in January 2077. The Great War, the event that ended life as we know it, occurred on October 23, 2077, so if there is a historically accurate version of the sim, it would have had to have been made between early January 2077 and late October 2077. If we count all of January and October, that's 10 months of development time. That's 10 months to contact the army soldiers who were there at the time in order to set up interviews, conduct the interviews and gather accurate testimony, storyboard and script what the simulation will actually entail, gather voice actors to read the lines. I don't know how the simulation was programmed, if it's all animated or maybe motion captured, but all the things I mentioned, well, it could be done in 10 months with a talented group of people. Is it going to be flawless and bug-free like the simulation that we play through is? I find that hard to believe. So the timeline of it all just seems a bit wonky for it to accurately portray the events. Is this making sense, or is this just the ramblings of a madman with too much free time? To give a bit of a recap, OA is likely not a reliable storyteller, but I believe that there's enough reasonable doubt thus far to continue exploring this rabbit hole. Yes, the sim was made before OA actually happened, but the version that the Lone Wanderer plays could be the most up-to-date and most accurate. Was Chase making tweaks? Yes, but there's enough reasonable doubt surrounding the tweaks to suggest that Chase may have been making the sim more historically accurate. Chase was at the conflict, the programmers were not. I just want to prove without a reasonable doubt that Operation Anchorage isn't a reliable storyteller. Think of me like a criminal prosecutor, but I'm trying to prove the guilt for a 2008 video game add-on instead of a criminal. With the outside factors acknowledged, let's dive into the version of the sim that the Lone Wanderer does play, and pick apart some aspects that don't sit right with me. Hero's story. The entire sim follows the journey of one unknown, unnamed soldier. The story of the simulation starts with a rookie soldier who almost single-handedly topples all of China's forces after a nearly 10-year stalemate. Do you believe that a single soldier was the true turning point? Or perhaps the more likely scenario that maybe the sim takes the stories from different soldiers, then creates this cohesive amalgamation of various tales from the front lines? The latter seems more likely to me. Doing a classic hero's tale as the storyline for your hyper-realistic military simulation is great when trying to maybe recruit people to the front lines or even providing high-intense combat experience. It's bad when trying to be historically accurate. Lack of respect. If a realistic army sim was to be created, what do you think would be the most important design philosophy? It's probably historical accuracy, right? Can't really claim to be realistic if parts of it aren't historically accurate. With that, I'd expect comes a certain amount of respect for everyone who fought in the conflict, the allies, and to an extent, even the opposition. We all know the old saying of history is written by the victors, and it's true. The sim disregards the events of the Sino-American conflict before America was winning. You're immediately dropped in at the turning point, and while that's fine, that's just where they chose to start the sim, but there is no mention of a 10-year stalemate, no mention of Canadian bloodshed, and the Chinese army is made to look like idiots. I don't speak the language myself, but I've read online that Jing Wei's Mandarin pronunciation is extremely poor, and how on earth does a speech check convince him to deathify himself? There's no way that could be anywhere close to reality, and the simulation is not only disrespectful to the opposition, but also to the American lives that were lost. The whole sim features nameless and faceless soldiers. The only credited people are the higher-ups in the chain of command: General Constantine, Sergeant Montgomery, Lieutenant Morgan. The sim doesn't pay respect to those who are boots on the ground, those who lost their lives in a grueling 10-year conflict. All this may raise the question, but what is even the point of the sim if it's not to accurately portray the conflict? The sim's function. Now I should note that with safety measures on, the sim wouldn't actually kill you, like it does in the game. McGraw notes that before you enter, certain safety measures are off, and if you die in the sim, you die in real life. Although it's not stated outright in any terminal, like I said, Protector McGraw believes it to be a hyper-realistic military training simulation, making the true purpose of the sim to provide a heavy combat experience to those who participated. But to me, the video gamey feel of the simulation disputes this claim. Realistic heavy combat doesn't feature infinite ammo, health canisters, and a linear path. I believe the program was advertised as a heavy combat sim to try and lure potential army recruits who wanted a taste of real combat into joining up. Or a more likely theory based on Constantine's dialogue at the end of the sim, to encourage other soldiers to volunteer for the front lines. Those who took part in the sim were given this video game-esque combat experience. Performing well in the sim and stopping the Chinese occupation of Alaska was used to convince civilians and other soldiers into becoming frontline soldiers. Because hey, if I can stop China in this realistic simulation, who's to say I can't do it for realsies? And it did seem to work that way, as a patient log found in a Charleston terminal mentions that an Anchorage veteran suffering from PTSD was repeatedly saying it wasn't like the simulations. Conclusions. With all the evidence piled up, I think we've proved beyond a reasonable doubt that the version of the simulation the Lone Wanderer experiences likely isn't a reliable storyteller. From what we know about the sim from outside factors to events in the sim, I think it's reasonable to believe that the sim is not a historically accurate retelling of events. Now, for the second part of the title. This will be a quick one, I hope. It doesn't really matter. While the specifics are likely wildly over-exaggerated, this is, for now, the most accurate telling of events that we do have. There is no tell-all director's cut of the Sino-American War. There is no Sino-American War in color. Now, with that being said, we do get some information on the conflict from outside the DLC from places like Fort Strong, the Fallout 1 intro scene, and some non-canon sources like the Fallout Bible and the Fallout 3 game guide. But as long as we acknowledge what biases the simulation has, and navigate that with tact, then the Operation Anchorage simulation is one of the best sources of information we have for piecing together the facts of the most significant pre-war battle in the Fallout universe. No, the sim isn't accurate to the in-game, real-life events of Operation Anchorage, but it is the best we got. And there you have it. Why Operation Anchorage isn't a reliable narrator, and why ultimately it doesn't matter. Don't forget to like, or subscribe, or comment, or all three. Have a good rest of your day. Cheers.
你们的下变蛋，你们会在空洞的中国军队面看似的眼神，我绝不会当你们的俘虏。